How's it going, everybody? Sean with LUMIX Live here, and on this holiday recorded stream while we are on break, I wanted to take some time and walk through the basic core functionality of the newer LUMIX cameras in a way to hopefully help those that are either coming back to the LUMIX system after a while, or those that have just picked up a brand new camera and it happens to be a LUMIX, just kind of understand various different functions with the camera, where certain things are, where the core components are for the various exposure settings, and hopefully maybe demystify some of the ways that we do certain things with our cameras. So I've got a G9 Mark II hooked up, and we're going to run through the menus on this camera, talking about first the automatic modes. Many people, when you first get a camera, especially in this category, you'll notice that out of the box, they're usually put in automatic, and you have to change them out of that. So I wanted to take some time and actually walk through those differences so that if you are brand new to these cameras, you'll hopefully understand where the differences are and why certain things are not available in the fully automatic mode. So let's take a look at the camera here. I've got my, as I said, a G9 Mark II hooked up here, and I am in fully automatic mode. This is, again, easy to kind of identify because on our top mode dial, it'll be in the IA mode. But you'll also notice it in the bottom left, in this case, because I've got something relatively close to the lens, you'll see the little eye icon with the flower in the bottom left. It's a pretty clear indicator that you're in automatic. Now, a couple things to know about our automatic mode. So for one, if I wanted to play around with color profiles, because a lot of people have picked up on the newer series of our cameras having the feature called real-time LUT and the ability to apply LUTs over still images, you'll notice that when I go into the actual menu system here to select photo styles, which is simply accessed by pressing the menu set button, when I go into this, you'll see that in fully automatic, I only have two choices. I have standard and a monochrome. So very simple, straightforward. If you know that you've picked up this camera because you want to go for that capability, because you've seen what a lot of people can do with it, the first thing you're going to want to do is turn the camera out of automatic mode and put it into something like program. Now, program is still going to get you the fully automatic functionality of a camera because you can have it set for auto ISO, your aperture and shutter speed are going to set dependent on the scene, and it's going to follow some basic logic for that. But once you change the camera out of the intelligent auto mode, this is where you'll notice that I have the full suite of photo styles available to me. So I have everything from standard to the brand new monochrome, the Leica monochrome color profile, which is a nice kind of punchy, rich monochrome black and white image, even into things like I have Vlog, I have real-time LUT, which is the video-specific use version of the, kind of LUT application to your content. And then I have the My Photo Style options. Now, as a brief refresher, those that want to do real-time LUT, we have a video about it, so I'll post that here. But as the quick refresher, real-time LUT can be utilized in the concept that I can take a LUT that is designed for photography, load it on top of a basic color profile so I can maintain my raw editing, but have the ability to come in, select something here, like I'll select this old school one that I like, and then now that is saved into that particular photo style. So really cool option there, but you have to be out of the automatic mode to have access to these kinds of options. Now, one of the other things that you may notice is that if I switch this back into fully automatic, you'll notice that a lot of things stay as default. So you lose a lot of control there. But what that means is that, things like ISO, like I'm pressing the ISO button on the top of the camera and I can't change it. I'm pressing the white balance button and I can't change it. It's because the IA mode is designed as a fully automatic. Think of it as a very high quality point and shoot at that point. So if you know that you want to be able to go in and change those things, you're going to go into, again, program, aperture, shutter, manual, any of the PAS or M modes on the camera. And now you'll notice that when I press ISO, I have choice to select my ISO or leave it at auto if I want. I also have the ability to change my white balance selections here. And you'll see that on our cameras, we have auto white balance, so just a neutral one. We have a cool toned one, and then as a newer edition, which is the warm toned one. These can be useful if you know that you're coming from various different camera brands, because everyone tends to kind of design their white balance a little differently. Some like to lean warmer, some like to lean cooler, some try to keep it as neutral as possible. We give you all three choices. So if you want to make those changes to the image, again, remember you have to be in program, aperture, shutter, or manual. So PAS or M on the mode dial. The other things that you'll notice here is that in fully automatic, when I press the button on the back of the camera, which is around the autofocus mode selector, so this is the S, C, or M selector on the back of the camera, when I'm in fully automatic, when I press this, all this does is tell me that I can turn on the tracking functionality. So this is a visual tracking function, so now when I half press the shutter, it's going to go in and look for that point and try to visually track it. But if I press it again, it goes back to the full area with the human detection turned on in this case. Now, if I want to be able to utilize the full breadth of autofocusing functionality that the new cameras offer, especially in the Mark IIs, so the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and the G9 Mark II, when I go into program and I press that button again, you'll see this is now where I have that full selection of the various different autofocus modes. So the visual tracking that I can also add subject detection to, full area, which is going to look at the entire image area, and then basically you don't have the ability to tell the camera, hey, focus over here. You have to override that if you want. Then I have the zone area, which can be a horizontal or vertical line. This can be great for certain scenarios where you know a very specific framing you want to work with, and you can position that row of focus areas to correlate to that. And you have your typical zone option. You have One Area Plus, which if you've never used our cameras, One Area Plus is it's kind of an expanded center point or expanded single point autofocus. You'll have two boxes that I can show you here. You have the box in the middle, which is the kind of priority area for what AF points it's going to use. So for the PDAF points on the new cameras. Then you have the kind of bracketed outer box. Now this is the support area. So if you're going to be tracking things like birds or kids running around, because maybe you're using this as like your family camera, that kind of thing, the objects that are in the center are obviously going to be priority. And then if you can't keep that box specifically on the target and they kind of move to that outer box area, it'll use those points as supplemental to make sure that it stays in focus. Then last one here, when you're in continuous autofocus, you have the One Area. Now, One Area on the newer cameras is a little different than we've done in the previous ones, because One Area now has an even smaller mode, which allows you to actually go down to the PDAF point for focusing. So if you know you want to be ultra critical in choosing a very specific autofocus point, you can go into this to where you'll see that you have the box with the crosshair in the middle. If I go one size larger, then it's going to be able to move more freely throughout the frame, but it can overlap multiple different AF points. When you go into the smallest one, you'll see that it gets locked to the specific points, and the grid array is designed for the 779 points that we have in the new cameras. So that gets you a little more flexibility for how you want to utilize your camera for autofocus. Now, the other thing here is when it comes to subject detection modes, since all of our newer cameras, the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, and the G9 Mark II, have expanded detection functionality in our cameras, you'll see that the mode options have kind of changed a little bit. And specifically on the G9 Mark II, they've changed quite a bit compared to the previous ones. So to start with, you have the ability to turn AF detection on in the menu just by going into the camera option, going to the focus sub-tab, and then you'll see AF detection settings. This is just whether or not you want them on or not. Then below that is detecting subject. Now, from this method of getting into it, this is where you can say, well, what type of subject? And in the G9 Mark II, we have human, animal, car, and motorcycle. And then under each of those, at least for the animal and the human detection, you'll see that you have which parts of the, in this case, human do you want to focus on. The eye, face, and body is going to be our full human detection mode, and this is going to be the most recommended of our focus options for the cameras. This is the one that's going to say, if I can't see the face, let me prioritize the head. If I can't see the head, let me prioritize the body. If the person turns away, let me prioritize the body or the back of the head. If I'm close enough, I'll prioritize face and eye. If I were to select this into the just face and eye option, the thing you have to kind of be aware of with this is that it is only going to be looking for face and eye. That means that if I turn away from the camera, and the microphone by that point, if I turn away, the camera's going to default to whatever your AF mode was selected for that particular shooting scenario. That can result in you potentially losing focus. That can, maybe not give you the best result you want. So when you're just starting out with the camera, recommend set it up in eye, face, and body if you're looking at, working with human detection. Or if we go into animal detection, this is where you'll be able to do either animal body, which is the traditional way that we've done animal detection. It still prioritizes the head, but it's only looking for the bodies of the animals. And if they're in the right plane, it can prioritize towards the head. But this is the new option in the camera. This is the eye and body. This is the option that allows you to have the actual AF box track the animal's eye to help determine and give you the confidence that, yes, we are focusing on the animal's eye. This is where we're going to go, and you're good to go. When it comes to animal detection, if you're on the G9 Mark II, this is where I'd recommend leaving it in eye and body. I find the results are stellar when it comes to casual birding photography. I am not claiming to be a professional wildlife and birding photographer, but it has been great for general overall kind of capture. So the thing that you'll notice that's different between the G9 Mark II, which we're showing you here, and an S5 Mark II or an S5 Mark IIX is that they don't have the animal detection, the car detection, or the motorcycle detection in the camera. So in those particular cases, if you're going to be photographing animals or creating videos of animals, just leave it in animal detection or human and animal, and it'll have that option there for you, and it'll highlight the animal for you. The next thing that you want to take a look at right out of the box when you get these cameras is the AF custom settings. Now we have two options for this. We have one in photo and one in video. So in the photography side, when I go into the menu here, you'll see that by default the camera's going to come under set 1. Now this is designed to be versatile. It's a very basic, kind of cover all of general photography for focus speeds. If you know that you're going to be doing, say, wildlife, sports photography, which would account for also, like, if you've got kids that run around or pets that run around like crazy, the default set 1 may not be tuned to how you would want it to work. Because of that, we've offered a lot of flexibility in this system to help you pick and set the camera up the way that you like it. So, as I said, default set 1, designed for just kind of general basic level shooting, works pretty good for pretty much everything that you're going to do. But if I'm going to go in and say I'm photographing, in this case, as our example says, trains, airplanes, objects that move with a continuous speed in one direction, I can just move this to set 2, and you'll see the parameters change for AF sensitivity, switching sensitivity, and motion prediction. Then I can go up and change this to set 3, which if I'm going to be doing any kind of sports, so in our demonstration here, football, should also be soccer in the US, basketball, or football, like in the US, this is a mode that you'll notice, again, you get the changes in the way the system's kind of defaulted here. So being a little more responsive in AF switching area, being more locked on AF sensitivity, but also really being variable with the moving subject prediction. These are all things that are going to help tune the AF system for various different styles of capture. And then my favorite, because I love photographing motorcycles and motorsports in general, we have set 4, which is, again, it's another tuning option. The biggest thing with the way our system is set up, though, in the photography side is that I can come in and I can change these. So I can go and say, like, hey, I really like the basic way Set 4 is working, but I find that I want it to try to stay a little more locked on. I don't want it to be as maneuverable. Or maybe I find that it's being too locked on at 0 and I want it to be more responsive. So you have all of this to be able to come through, change these settings, and make them completely your own for your style of shooting. But if I'm in the video side of the world, this is where I can come down into the camcorder option, and you'll see we also have AF custom settings for video. Now this one is going to be a little different. You'll see that when I go into set, I only have AF speed and AF sensitivity. I don't have moving subject prediction. This allows me to speed the system up, slow it down, as far as what the speed of the movement between focus points is. And then AF sensitivity, which is how quick do I want the system to move from a subject to another subject. And what I mean by that is, how tightly do you want it to stay locked on that particular subject that you've got at first, versus when you move the camera or something maybe comes between you and your subject, how locked on do I want this to be? Again, I can make this ultra responsive, I can make this ultra locked on, and these are just the kind of options you have for the video side. Default, this is going to be turned off, so just bear that in mind. You would have to turn this on in video, but I highly encourage you to just try the system default out of the box first, because if you're coming from the previous generation LUMIX cameras, it is a very different system. Even to the point that the AF custom settings that are in this option, where you change these, people have formulas and recipes that they've made for, like the GH5 and things like that to get the best out of the autofocus system. If you try those on this camera, you may be not super happy, because it's a different application of the way this stuff works now that you have the PDAF system as the kind of initial targeting system for your autofocus. So try it default out of the box first, then play around and tweak with it based on your particular style of capture. This kind of segues next into the other part that I want to bring up, which is knowing that a lot of people in general are getting into live streaming, broadcasting, podcasting, things like that. Or you may be in a situation where you've got this camera and you're going to be recording to an external device. You're not going to be using the internal recording of the camera. And in cases like that, out of the box, there are a couple things you want to make sure that you change and get set up so that things like autofocus run and you don't have to actually start recording for that autofocus to be running. So if we look back at the camera here, you'll see that I have an option here called continuous autofocus in the video mode. Now, again, this is under the video options, and then it's under the focus sub-tab, and then continuous AF. This option is something that you're going to want to pay attention to if you're going to be using the camera heavily with an, kind of video out over HDMI instead of prioritizing recording internally. This mode, when you go into it, you'll see you have two options. You have mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 is the way it's going to come when you're in the photo modes for the camera. So right now, because I'm in program, if I were to hit the red button, it's going to function like a video camera, but it's going to have some other requirements or restrictions compared to doing full-blown manual video. But what you'll see is that this says continuous autofocus will only work while video is recording. What that means is that if I want this to actually do continuous autofocus in standby, I have to press record for video, and then it will start actually tracking for autofocus. Otherwise, it's going to focus once, lock on that spot, and that's where it's going to be until you press the shutter button again, or half press it for focus. If I'm using this camera as a webcam, or something where I want to be able to record externally with it, this is where I want to make sure that I have it set to mode 2. Mode 2 just changes the system up and says continuous autofocus can run in the standby mode for the camera. You'll notice that in photography, this is not an option. You have to be in the manual or creative movie mode for this. So that's the option, the M with the camcorder icon on the dial. But that will enable you to have that access to be able to do everything you need to in kind of just recording and not have it function where you have to remember to press record on the camera. So keep that in mind when you get this thing set up, if you're going to be using the camera that way. If you have these cameras and you're in a situation where, I maybe not needing the camera for part of the season, I want to hook it up, kind of like what we do here for the live streams, as I have an S5 Mark II hooked up, and that's my webcam. Making sure that you set this up with mode 2 for continuous autofocus is going to be the big benefit, to make sure that you've got everything set and it's going to focus for you when you try to actually put something in front of the camera. The last thing that I want to talk about, before we talk about some of the kind of core accessories and things that I recommend you keep in mind when you're getting these new cameras, is the kind of little things here. So focus peaking on our cameras. You have a couple really cool ways to use it, both for photography and videography. And on the newer cameras, what you're going to see is that you have a couple of new settings available to you that maybe you didn't have in the previous cameras. So for now, we've moved the focus peaking sensitivity to be a +2, -2 kind of readout. Now, this is going to change how visible focus peaking is on the back of the camera for you. By default, it's going to be 0. I highly recommend, this is something that if you know you're going to be manually focusing with the camera, say you're adapting, old school lenses to this, play with these, go in, tweak it, try +1, try -1, try +2, try -2. See which one works best as far as the size of it goes. But remember that the larger the focus peaking appears on the screen, the less precise it is for actually how accurate your focus is going to be when you're manually focusing. You're trading off visibility for accuracy versus accuracy with harder visibility, because you're looking at pixel level for peaking at this point. The finer the peaking looks, the more close to proper in focus you are, versus the larger it is, you're just giving yourself more room to have some discrepancy between that point. Now, granted, from my testing, even the most coarse version of our focus peaking is still well within what depth of field's going to be. Unless you're working with like a 0.95 lens on a full frame camera, you're going to be fine playing around with them. So don't worry too much about it. The other thing here is going to be the display color. Because everyone has different sensitivities to color in how easy you can see them for contrast. That's why we offer so many different color options here for the different focus peaking outlines. Typically, you'll see that you have the primary colors. You have red, green, and blue options. Then you have some various different versions of it. You even have a white option. This just, again, lets you go in, set the color that works best for you. Then you have display during AFS, which typically I turn on. If you are an autofocus single person, when you have pressed the shutter, you get into focus. What this will do is this will overlay the focus peaking display on it, so you can again confirm, like, am I actually where I want to be? This can be very useful for macro photography in situations where that every millimeter counts for where your focus plane is. So this can be a really nice help. And then you have display during MF. You go into this menu and you've got a couple new options. When shutter is pressed is on, when live view is enlarged, or just in general when you're in live view. So if you're someone who likes to have focus peaking but you don't want it on all the time, you would rather have it when you do punch in for manual focus, you can turn off while in live view. That means that your display will be clean until you engage either half pressing the shutter, or you have the live view being enlarged for preview. So lots of cool little options now added into the focus peaking. One last thing with regards to focus peaking, actually, is if you come into the setup menu, so this is the gear icon, in our camera menus, we have an option for monochrome live view, and this is going to be under the monitor display for video, and it works in stills as well. Monochrome live view is a great tool if you're someone who has issues seeing the colors against a colorful background. This allows you to come in, change the background so that in the viewfinder and on the rear of the camera display, it's going to be black and white. but the focus peaking is going to be actually still in color. So it's much easier to see that versus what you'd end up running into if you have a fully color image with focus peaking. So you don't have to worry too much about what color you choose. Now you can look at it just based on a black and white image. Now this does not burn into the footage. This just stays as a preview. So this can be a really nice help for making sure that if you're using manual focus, you're good and set up with how it's going to work for your eyes. Some of the other things here, last couple things, is that if I go up into the settings menu, so this is the wrench menu, you'll see you have the options here for, this is where your card format is, this is where your double card slot function is, this is where I can come in and say, I want to either be doing relay record, backup recording, or allocation recording. If we use allocation recording, this is where I can say I want JPEGs sent to card 1, I want my raw images sent to card 2, and I want my video images sent to card 3. This can be a really useful way if you know that like you're working with a really high quality card and maybe a mid-tier card. You want to make sure that all your video and your raw files are written to the faster, higher quality card, but your JPEGs can be put onto the maybe, lower tier card. Or if you just like having better overall kind of organization of where your images are. This can be a nice benefit, makes it easy for, what are called like turn and burn jobs, or if you know that you just want to prioritize the JPEGs and the RAWs are just it's nice if I have them. Now you know that you've got them all in one folder. You don't have to really think about it. This is also the area where you turn on the SSD recording for cameras like the S5 Mark IIX and the G9 Mark II. Now, remember, with SSD recording, it is only going to be to the SSD. You can't dual record to the SD cards. You also can't copy from SD card to SSD or vice versa. So keep that in mind. But I want to talk about the SSDs in a moment right after this. Then you also have on a lot of the newer cameras, this is also the menu area where you'll find thermal management. By default, your camera is going to be shipped with thermal management set to standard. This is where you're going to get the, kind of general overall performance of the camera. But if you're in the video side and you know that you want to record for extended periods of time, this is where you would come in and be able to select high. Now, it is going to give you the notice here that says when using this mode, the camera can get very hot because we're allowing the camera to run hotter than what the standard option is. It is recommended that you work with the camera on a tripod or a gimbal or something like that, because cameras can get pretty hot when you're working with this. But this is also the option that you would select if you know that you're going to need more extended runtime in even climate-controlled rooms. On a camera like the G9 Mark II, it becomes a little more temperamental with temperature. The hotter the temperature is, because this is a photography first designed camera, the hotter the ambient temperature is, the higher the chance of running into the thermal threshold is. On cameras like the S5 Mark II, the Mark IIX, or even a GH6, those aren't really going to be concerns for you. We have the option to come in here and increase the thermal limit even on those cameras. But those are actively cooled cameras, so you'll be fine. I've tested them into 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and they've been golden. So definitely play around with that. The other thing that people tend to also, kind of ask us right out of the box is, the screen on my camera, the back LCD or the viewfinder keep getting brighter and darker depending on the scene that I'm looking at. Well, that's actually very easy to fix. That is by coming into the menu here and going to monitor backlight and changing it from auto, so auto is how it ships, to one of these dedicated options here. Now, I typically put mine at ±0 because I want it at neutral. The benefit here also being that if you're using your screen to partially judge your image exposure, which you can do, but you have to try to remember to set everything as neutral as possible. Setting it at 0 helps you, kind of judge shot to shot if there's major brightness differences. The other thing you'll notice here is that I have monitor settings here. So if I move my face cam, you'll see that I have options for brightness, contrast, saturation, hue, or tint, the two different tint levels. This lets me actually tune the rear screen if I want to tweak the colors and how everything looks. So you do have some options there. But if I want to access the viewfinder brightness, a couple things you can do is actually look through the viewfinder and work the menu system. As you can see here, I put my, you can't see it, but I covered up the EVF sensor, and now you'll see that monitor option just changed to viewfinder. If I remove it, it changes back to monitor. So when you're actually looking through the viewfinder, or you're just covering the viewfinder so that it's triggered, this is where I can go in and change those same exact settings for the viewfinder in the EVF. This lets me keep the brightness at a set level instead of letting it function as automatic. So the last thing I want to talk about before we talk about some of the accessories here is the Bluetooth functionality. This is something that I highly recommend you set up on your camera when you first get it. This will make connecting to the LUMIX Sync app much faster. This also opens up a lot of other functionality with the camera that maybe you didn't realize you have. So what you're going to do is go into the setup menu. You're going to go into the in and out option, and then you're going to go to Bluetooth. Now from here, all you do is you click Bluetooth, go to set, go to pairing, and now it's going to tell you like, hey, here's the pairing information. This is what I need. Then you're going to go into your phone, open up the LUMIX Sync app, and by default, you're going to press on the question mark in the top left, go to camera pairing, and follow the options on screen to actually go to the camera registration option. What that's going to do is it's going to let you run through. It's going to look for the camera that you've got set for pairing. You'll see it pop up on the app, and then now what it'll do is it'll bridge the Wi-Fi connection. It'll get everything set up for how you need it to actually be functioning for your particular camera. Now, the other cool thing is that when you actually have it set up, you'll see that you have the options for things like remote wake up, which means that I can use my phone to wake the camera up. Caveat here being that Bluetooth is on while you're doing this, which means when you turn the camera off, there's going to be a little bit more of a parasitic draw because you've got Bluetooth running. Then you have returning from sleep mode, which is, do you want the camera to return to shooting functionality or do you want it to return to playback? Auto transfer functionality. This is where you can have it set that as you're taking photos, it's auto sending them over to your mobile device. Location logging. This is GPS tracking. So as long as you have the app open, even if it's in the background on your phone, and you've got it connected over Bluetooth, it's going to be sending the GPS coordinates to the photos, so it gets burned into that image's metadata as you're capturing it. Then you have auto clock set. This is a really nice one. This just Bluetooth connects between the two devices and makes sure that your internal clock is set properly on the camera. So making sure that Bluetooth is set up first gets all of the Wi-Fi setting stuff done out of the box. So you end up not having to worry about, did I set this up? Where do I find this setting? How do I go about connecting Wi-Fi? Once you've got this set up and they're Bluetooth connected, when you open the app, you'll get the little icon that shows, hey, you're connected to Bluetooth. Here's the camera ID number. When you tap remote shooting, it's going to automatically tell the camera, hey, I need to connect Wi-Fi, and do the handshake for you. So it makes things super easy when it comes to actually getting the most out of the app side of the camera. Couple things to make sure with that, though. With the app, make sure that in your phone settings, you are allowing the LUMIX Sync app to run in the background, and you are allowing things like Bluetooth to run in the background, or Wi-Fi to be connected even though there is no internet connection. On Android, you'll typically get that notification when you first make the Wi-Fi connection. It'll tell you, do you want to connect to this? There's no internet. Are you sure about this? Typically, in that case, at least on my Samsung devices, I want to make sure that I tap Always Connect. That'll bypass that notice in the future. On iOS devices, a lot of times you have to make sure that you are trusting the network that you're connecting to, and making sure in the app settings that you do allow it to run in the background. On Android, if you don't use the LUMIX Sync app for quite a while, you may have to make sure that it doesn't get put into like deep sleep mode, which is where it strips a lot of the background processes from it to kind of make sure that it's not running. So just kind of keep those in mind when you're working with apps. This can happen across pretty much all camera apps as phones are getting more picky with how they run in the background. So, yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about is, as I mentioned earlier, SSDs and the kind of first round of accessories that people tend to buy with your cameras. So to start with, I want to talk about SD cards. So I have a couple of SD cards here that I want to talk about. I have a very mid-tier, kind of average, everyday card that you would pick up, and then I have a much higher end, more professional grade card on the other side here. The pro grade card is the much higher end professional card. The SanDisk version of the card I have here is more of a mid-tier card. In the LUMIX cameras, we make a big deal of talking about making sure that you use the V specifications for card ratings on your cameras, to the point that we actually have a published list of validated cards that we have tested and work with partners to make sure that they are staying up to date and everything works the way it should. Online, you'll see people will tell you, oh, well, a V30 card should be fine for, things like the S5 Mark II at its highest possible image quality for video recording. And while technically, if you look at the numbers that are written on that card, maybe they will, there are a lot of things that kind of can get crossed there. My purpose in discussing this is to make sure that you don't end up getting yourself a memory card that is either right on the ragged edge of what the specification of the camera's capabilities are, or it is it's spec too low because there's a misunderstanding of what those numbers mean on the cards. It is highly recommended with the LUMIX cameras, especially the newer ones that have, higher quality video functionality, that have open gate recording, that have the frame marker functionality, which I'm going to link to in the video here so you can continue watching more about that. We highly recommend V60 cards or greater in the LUMIX cameras. Reason for this is that V60 is a specification that means that the card's going to write at a minimum of that V60 spec. That is more than enough for any of the options that you'll see in a camera like the S5 Mark II. When you go to a camera like the S5 Mark II X, it's actually highly recommended to go V90, because now you go into the options of being able to record all intra, which can have the 600 megabit per second option. Even on the G9 Mark II, I highly recommend you use a V90 card for just general functionality. There are a lot of good brands out there that are making V90 cards. We work with SanDisk and ProGrade. Those are the two main ones that we've got validated right now, but we have more available as well. But it's not just that the camera is going to be able to take, kind of benefit of making sure that you'll be able to record any of the options. It's that when you're going to offload images from the card to your computer, V90 is going to offload much faster than V30. They're going to be able to sustain the write speeds and the read speeds much better than some of the other cards can. But this ties into what I mentioned about the dual card slot function on the camera. If you're someone who's a photo and video user and you want to be able to bounce back and forth between the two, this is where you can very easily have something like you pick up one nice, really high-spec card, so V90 is my recommendation, and then you can pick up something that's like maybe a V60, can even be a U3 or what's now called V30, and know that when you go into your settings on your camera for the allocation recording, you can set things like JPEGs to the slower card, since those aren't going to take as much time to write, they're smaller files. And then you can make sure that things like your RAW photos and your video functionality is written to the other card, which would be your higher end card. This can be a good way to compromise to make sure that you're getting really good media. I mean, let's face it, you spend a decent amount of money on cameras and lenses. Don't let media be the area where everything kind of falls apart. This lets you kind of balance that out. Make sure you spend on a really good card. They can be expensive, so that's why, a lot of times you want to find a balance that works best for you. But then the basic cards, I wouldn't go ultra basic. I would at least stick, like if you're going to go SanDisk, go with the Extreme Pro. If you're going to go with Pro Grade, go with the Gold Series. Kind of keep that as a basics there. Pro Grade and SanDisk are kind of my two main cards that I've been using recently. But I do also use cards from like Delkin and... yeah, that's kind of it. Delkin, ProGrade, and SanDisk are the three main cards that I use these days. Last but not least here, it's going to be about SSDs. Now, newer cameras, S5 Mark II X, G9 Mark II, and GH6, all have SSD recording functionality. This is where you're going to be able to take an external SSD and use it as a recording media for photos and videos. So on our setup, we have a couple of different drives that are validated. The Samsung T5s, even though they're very hard to come by now, that is the little kind of squared ones. These can be a really good option for you if you're looking to do, you know, kind of high capacity in an SSD. What's nice is that these have accessories from companies like SmallRig that are basically holders that let you lock it in and then mount it to a cage on your camera. Make sure you're looking at the validated list that we have online. I'll put a link down in the description for it, because I've gone out and done the testing for some, where I've taken a Samsung 980 Pro NVMe SSD and put it into an external NVMe housing and tried to run this on the camera. Now, by spec, this SSD that's in here should be perfectly fine to keep up and be able to record everything on the camera. The part that people don't realize is that there is more to just plugging in the NVMe SSD into this. There is a controller involved in these housings, and there are different power requirements. So this particular option to go with an NVMe drive, which they're getting a little bit more cost-effective, ends up actually not working well on the camera. And this is only a 1 terabyte drive. So I have something that is 1 terabyte and a little bit more compact that's designed to fit really well and mounts right to my camera, versus a third-party option that is really designed for laptops and computers that can get me fast media that I can make up myself, or, and then this doesn't become reliable. Or I have probably my favorite option, and we've talked about this a lot on the streams before. It's the Condor Blue SSD handle. So this is possibly one of my favorite SSD options for the newer cameras. So this is a handle designed for the NATO rail system here. But what's really cool about this is that this has an SSD built right into the handle. So now I don't have to worry about a separate kind of accessory that now just kind of gets bolted onto my camera and kind of takes up some space. Maybe it's not the most ergonomic way that I want to work. Maybe I'm a video shooter and I know that I'm going to have a handle on the camera anyway. So why not duplicate that with an SSD in the actual handle itself? Condor makes the right angle USB cables that let me actually plug this right into the camera and kind of cable manage. But even as a photographer, I can set this up as a vertical left side handle, route this so that I can plug it into the USB-C port on the camera, and now I've got a really stable shooting platform, and I've got up to 2 terabytes of storage with it. The Condor handle uses the SanDisk ProBlade SSDs up to 2 terabyte. And what's nice is that if you're like me and you have way more storage because you're kind of all over the place with it, they make the dock that lets you just plug these right in, have 4 of them running there, or you get the external device for actually plugging it in separately. But probably the coolest part is that this also acts as a reader, so I can just plug this into my laptop while I'm on the go and work with it and edit with it in post. So if you're starting to look into, what do I do next with my LUMIX camera? I kind of understand the basics. I want to take advantage of things like SSD recording. I want to make sure I have the best memory cards. I want to make sure that, I'm getting the most I can out of this camera. These are the things that kind of help at least start pointing you in a good direction. So with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. This was definitely a longer of our pre-recorded streams while we're away. Just as a reminder, next week's stream, January 4th, will also be pre-recorded as I am traveling out to CES for the show there. If you're going to be out in Las Vegas for CES, make sure to stop by the Panasonic booth. Matt Fraser, myself, Neil, and a few others will be there. We have a really cool experiential booth set up. Come get your photos taken. Get some, kind of cool little video clips taken of you. We'll be talking a lot about real-time LUT and kind of the cool functionality that we have there in the photo side. Otherwise, we will be back live again on January 18th. So it's going to be a little while before we are back live. With next week being the travel day out, so I got a recorded stream. The 11th, because we're going to be at CES. So unfortunately, I can't live stream from the show there. So yeah, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications for when we do come back live. But we will be posting recorded streams next week and the following week. So again, make sure you subscribe. Other than that, I hope everyone has had a great holiday season. I look forward to coming back to everybody in the new year. And with that, I hope everyone has a really good new year. And yeah, other than that, thanks for an awesome year. We will see everybody again January 18th live. And yeah, that's about it. Take care, everybody. Happy New Year.